Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is Mike Davies, and in today's tutorial I'll be showing you how to wrap text around a cylinder using GIMP. I'll be using GIMP version 2.10.22, which is the latest version of GIMP at the time of this tutorial. Before I get into that, don't forget to check out my website at daviesmediadesign.com. As always, I have tons of GIMP, Inkscape, and Darktable tutorials on here. You can get more by becoming a DMD Premium member, and I have tons of free software help articles, so definitely check that out. You can enroll in my GIMP 2.10 Masterclass from beginner to pro photo editing on Udemy. And as I mentioned, you can get more by becoming a DMD Premium member. And I'll include a link to this as well as all the relevant links from this tutorial in the description of the video. Alright, so here is the composition we'll be creating for today's tutorial. This is going to be using all built-in tools found inside of GIMP, so let's dive right in. For starters, I'm going to create a text composition which we're going to use to wrap around the cylinder. So to do this, I'll go to File, New. Your composition size can be any size really, but I like to keep things simple by going with 1000 by 1000. You do want this to be a square composition, so you want your width and your height to be the same. And I'll come over here and click OK. At least in my opinion, that is easier. Next, what you're going to want to do is add your text to the composition. So I can do that by coming over here and grabbing the text tool. And I already know I'm using the font Impact Bold Condensed. The reason I'm using this font is that it is a nice bold font, a thick font, so it's easy to read even when you are wrapping it around a cylinder, nice and prominent as well. So I'll come over here to Font and I'll start typing Impact. And here you can see Impact Condensed. I think I called it Bold Condensed, same thing. And then for the size, I went with 150 pixels as my size. The color you can have be whatever you want it to be. In this case, I'm going to go with white as my color and click OK. And we don't really need this line spacing. We're only going to have one line, but I'll just set that to 0 just to simplify things. All right, so now that we have all of our font settings, and by the way, you can always scroll through the fonts here if you want to use a different font. But I'll come over here and click on my composition. And with the caps lock key on, I'll type free software. And I recommend from this point making adjustments to the size or the font if you want to change this before we go to the next step. But after you have set your font up the way you want it, now we'll come over here to the transform tool group and we're going to go with the rotate transform tool. And making sure the transform mode is set to layer here, I'm just going to click on this and drag. And if I hold the shift key, that'll drag this based on 15-degree increments over here. And so what I'm doing is I'm just making this so that it's going vertical now instead of horizontal. And I'll come over here and click rotate. And of course, once you transform the text layer, it's actually going to convert the text layer to a pixel layer. So if I hit Control Z, there it's a text layer, Control Y, now it is a pixel layer. So here's where you should be after you've rotated this. Now let me come over and grab my alignment tool. And I can click once on here on our text layer. Make sure you're clicked on the pixels of the text layer just so it gets selected. And then we're going to come over here to align inside of the tool options and change this to image. So we're aligning this relative to the entire image. Now we're going to center align this both vertically and horizontally. So now we have some nice centered text here. By the way, my background color right now is like a bluish color. That doesn't matter because we're going to get rid of that background here in a second. But now we're going to duplicate this text layer, and the number of times we duplicate the text layer is going to depend on how many instances of this text we want wrapping around the cylinder. If you want tons of instances, you're going to want to go with probably around 8 to 10. If you want there to be few instances, you can go with as little as 1, so just keep it at this current text layer. Or you can go with something like 2, 3, 4, whatever. So let me come over here to my free software text layer and duplicate this. I'll go with 6 layers total, so we'll just go 5 more. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we have 6 of these layers total. Once we've done that, with my alignment tool still selected, I'm going to click and drag my mouse over these layers. So this is called the rubber band feature, and if you wrap the rubber band around all of the layers inside there, it will select all of the layers underneath as opposed to just that top layer. So now when we come here to the alignment tool options down to the distribute option, we can distribute this from left to right. So when I click that option, it's going to evenly spread out my text here across the entire composition. So if I were to add 7 or 8 layers of text, this would be more tightly aligned here, and you might even start to get some overlap. So I think 6 is a pretty good number here. But now what we'll do is merge all these layers together. So let's come down here and just click this merge icon, and we're just going to merge everything onto a single layer. And then we're going to make the layer the same size as the composition. So we'll go to Layer, Layer to Image Size. And finally, let's come over here to the background layer, and we're just going to delete this layer. So there you can see we just have our text. And then I'm just going to add a blank layer above this. So we'll create a new layer. Let's name this blank. My caps lock key is still on. And fill this with transparency and click OK. You'll see why that's important here in a moment. But now let's come back here, click on the free software text layer, make sure this is active for the next step. The next step is actually mapping the text to the cylinder. So to do that, we're going to hit the / key on the keyboard or go to Help, Search and run a command. And I'm going to type in map, and we're going to go with this map object option. So double click on that. Right now this is set to map to a plane. What we're going to do is change this. So we're going to go with cylinder, and we want a transparent background. So there you can see this is in a cylinder shape. We're going to create a new layer from the result of this. And I like to have the Update Preview Live option checked. If you have a slower computer, I don't recommend keeping this checked, but I have a pretty fast computer, so I'm going to keep that checked. The anti-aliasing here is going to smooth out the result, so you can turn this all the way up to 5, once again, if you have a fast computer. Otherwise, keep that somewhere around 3, although the result won't be as smooth. And actually, let me turn off the wireframe because we don't really need to see that. And I can also come over here and zoom out so I can get a better look at what's going on here. So this is obviously a very rough look right now at the text wrapped around the cylinder. Obviously this is a pretty rough look at the text wrapped around the cylinder. So let's change the look here. Let's come over here to orientation. So you have position as well as rotation. If I use the Z position, I can zoom this out a bit. And then we can rotate this as well. So here you'll see we have X, so that's going to rotate that a bit. We have Y, which is just going to roll the cylinder basically, and we have Z. So you can play around with the various axes here and just get this to where you can get a pretty good look at the final cylinder. All right, so here are the settings I decided to go with for my rotation to get this so that it is upright, not upside down, and also facing the viewer here so it's easy to read. Now there is a lot of clutter because the top and bottom portions of the cylinder contain text. So let's change that to our blank layer by coming over here to the cylinder tab. And for the top portion, we're going to change that to blank. For the bottom portion, we will also change that to blank. So that is our blank layer right here. I'll come over here and click preview to update it. And as you can see, that has updated and it's way less cluttered. So let's move on to lights because I want to adjust the way the light looks here. In my personal opinion, I prefer to have this set to directional light. It's not going to look great at first, but if I come over here to the direction vector, I can change this to +1 for the X value, and that's going to change the location of where the light is coming from. So that's going to be coming from the front instead of the back. And you can always play around with all these settings here just until you get something you like. So there we can bring the Y down to -0.5, and maybe I'll just go with 0.75 for Z for now. So these direction vector settings are just allowing you to set the exact direction the light is coming from. So you have an X-axis, a Y-axis, and a Z-axis, so it's a 3D plane. So just play around with those settings until you get the light in the location you want. But then we can also come over here to the Material tab, and we can play around with the intensity levels of the light and the reflectivity of the light relative to the actual text. And I'm not going to go that much into this stuff here. I do recommend you guys play around with it, but I'll just add a new ambient setting here, and then we can also play around with the diffuse. So I don't like that. So I usually go up and see what happens, you know, above the default value, and if I don't like the way that looks, I'll go below the default value. But I'm just going to go with these settings here just for the sake of time. And once you're ready, you're going to come over here and click OK. So here we have our text wrapped around a cylinder, and because we checked the new layer option, it did create a new layer from this. Of course, there's a bunch of stuff going on behind here, so let's put this on its own composition. I'll go to File, New, and I always like to place this on an HD composition, so 1920 by 1080. Click OK. Let's change the background color to black, and then we can come back over here and click and drag this layer. Come over here to the tab, hold your mouse over it to select this composition, hover over the composition itself and release. So there you have your text. Shift S will grab the scale tool and we can scale this up. If I hold Control, it'll scale from the center, and I'll hit scale. And there's our final result. I do recommend playing around with the lights so you can get the shadow and everything looking the way you want. In this case, there's not a ton of separation between this line of text right here and the line of text behind it, but I think you guys get the point regardless. And one last thing I want to point out, if I come over here and hide this, if you want your text to be a different color or you want to apply even some sort of gradient to this, I do recommend you change the color of the text before you use that map object filter to map this to the cylinder. So right now this is set to white. If I came over here to the free software text layer, locked that alpha channel, and then clicked and dragged this black color on here, now we have black text. If I hit the G key on my keyboard, I can then draw a gradient. Now we have gradient text. I don't recommend doing a white to black gradient just because of the way the lighting works, but you guys get the point. All right, that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and click the bell icon to be notified each time I have a brand new tutorial. You can check out any of the links to my resources in the description of the video. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.